Steph, I think there's something fascinating happening, though, with his base, specifically a segment of the base that I'm familiar with as a dude with a Twitter internet addiction. There are a bunch of apolitical people out there who were into this whole campaign, the premise of Donald Trump, the promise of him, because he was going to get the deep state, because there were pedophiles conspiratorially functioning with the protection of the most powerful people in the world. And he has lost that credibility. And I know we always are tempted, whether it's Elon Musk beefing with Trump, whether it's any number of actual convictions, this is going to be the thing that's going to get him. The thing that feels different about this is that this is the most Twitter-addicted political regime in the history of the world. And this is a story that is unfolding in real time in ways they can feel among a base that, again, is defined by its culture war more than even its politics. And so the hypocrisy here, at a certain point, Steph, the last remaining shred of confidence I have, the last remaining shred of optimism I have in the American polity, you could argue, is that this might be a bridge too far for people who were sold. We're going to take down Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and instead, the literal opposite is happening. It's kind of the ultimate test of, does anything even matter?
Okay, because Pablo, whether or not there is an Epstein list, that may or may not be true. Everything surrounding this man seems truly awful, and it does stink to the high heavens the amount of extremely wealthy and powerful people from all walks of political life that seem to have been connected to him and paying him millions of dollars. So there is something to it.
Oh, yeah, look, the whole Bill Clinton being in the birthday book thing, you know, you can't, I mean, will they try to have their cake and eat it too? Will you try to point that out but ignore the stuff about Trump? Certainly there might be an attempt, but I'm just watching a lot of these dudes who were his biggest backers, especially in the quote-unquote manosphere, Steph, who are saying to themselves, this is too much. And it's just, it's an unprecedented turn in a part of his base that he really didn't have a lot to do to keep them. But this is just the one thing he can't, because this was the number one A1 story in the newspaper that Donald Trump was publishing online every day to that audience. And now they're saying, so what about that, actually?
Joel, the president is losing independence, and his approval ratings, according to Gallup, are at a new low this term, 37%. Republicans at this point still seem to be with him. What's your take on all of this?
Well, a couple things. One, I'm glad you recentered us on what Ghislaine Maxwell is accused of, what she's credibly convicted of, why she's in jail right now, which is aiding and abetting a child sex predator. But some of the accusations about her are pretty awful as well. I mean, she allegedly participated in some of these things. And it gets me to also this broader thing of, why does Donald Trump always find himself in the company of heels, of these worst people in every timeline, whether it's Bukele or Vladimir Putin or Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein? I have no idea what Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein did together. And to be honest with you, that is a dark alley I don't want to walk down, because I don't want to know what they talked about and whatever things in common they shared. But what I do know is this is someone who has never stood on the side of regular people, of people like me and you. And to your question about what do Democrats do with this and what are the political ramifications of this, it's so interesting because I actually think what Donald Trump has done, he's actually solved one of the biggest messaging challenges for Democrats right now. One of the biggest challenges has been for Democrats, how do you do the economic storytelling, the pocketbook, kitchen table issues, and the democracy, weaponization of government, all the parade of horribles things together? Well, guess what? Donald Trump has tied those things together. You can now, as a Democrat, credibly talk about how his priorities are off. He promised you he was going to make your life better. He was going to make things more affordable. He hasn't done any of it. All he's focused on doing is transferring wealth to his billionaire buddies and covering up their terrible illegal actions. And that's a message that I think resonates for Democrats. And I think you'll see it whether it's this coming recess and on throughout this political cycle all the way to 2026.
It may do more than resonate with Democrats. Matt, let's go to your most recent article. The headline: July 2025 is when the Trump era started to end. Explain it.
Well, look, I think that Donald Trump, it took about a decade since he came down the escalator. It took 6 months into this second term. I think he became a lame duck. Now, obviously, he technically became a lame duck on January 21st or whenever he was inaugurated. But I think in the public imagination and certainly in the minds of some of his supporters, and I'm talking now about kind of the elite opinion leaders and influencers, they now view Donald Trump as a lame duck. And what that means is they're now starting to think about their post-Trump careers, right? So if you're going to run for office, someday we can now imagine that Trump is someday no longer going to be president. So you start jockeying for position. You start positioning yourself, whether you're a podcaster and you want to be a top YouTuber who has stood against the deep state, or whether you want to actually succeed him as the standard bearer. And I think that this is a very significant shift, that to view him as no longer the sort of indisputable leader who is omnipotent. And I think you can see it when you look, like Pablo was talking about, right? There's some people in the MAGA base, like the Charlie Kirks, who I think are going to fall in line. But there are other folks, the Andrew Schultzes of the world, the Theo Von, some of these podcasters who were only kind of loosely affiliated with MAGA anyway. They value they were against kind of the woke, politically correct stuff, but they want to be intellectually honest. And so I think the Epstein thing really was the tipping point. It created a permission structure where you could go against Trump and kind of out-MAGA him, go after him from the right. And that's a new innovation, I think, in politics.
So that's kind of the thing, because Trump came into... Oh, yes, Joel, please.
No, forgive me. I was just going to say something. What this Epstein thing has also done, it normalizes Trump into just being another, freeze-dried or rather blow-dried politician. He's just another politician. All he's there is to look after his buddies, to look after the well-heeled and the well-connected. He doesn't care about you. His special sauce, his differentiator has been, I am the bully that's going to go and make your life better, and I'm going to make their life hell. Well, guess what? He's no better than any other standard issue politician now. And I think the Epstein story tells that. It's a storytelling device that is more natural. It's more organic than anything you could drum up as a Democrat or as a political opponent, because the story tells itself. Everyone knows what they're looking at. They're looking at one wealthy guy protecting a bunch of other wealthy people and covering up awful behavior in the process.
Okay, so that makes me think Trump came into power basically by tapping into the anger at the deep state. But given his response to the Epstein files, is he risking turning himself into that deep state? Pablo?
Yeah, look, this is a story that was born in the primordial ooze of these podcasts. And Dan Bongino becomes the deputy director of the FBI. Kash Patel, another one of these guys who was all about this, becomes the literal FBI director. And Steph, some of this, I also want to de-intellectualize some amount of this, because some of this is just straight up stupid. Like, it's a clumsy, clumsy cover-up. It is the easiest game of hypocrisy detective to say, you were saying this before, now you're doing the opposite. Again, there is some Shakespeare here, right? Methinks the president doth protest too much. You listen to him talk about this at any point, and it's very clear that when he's pivoting to Barack Obama, he's doing it because of the stuff we're showing on the screen. And so the whole deep state idea, look, this was obvious to anybody who was paying attention well before this. But simply because it feels like it's the most insulting version of insulting his base's intelligence, he's kind of hit bottom in that regard, and that is a fascinating sociological development to get academic again.
But then, Pablo, doesn't this show what little regard Trump has for his voters? Whether everything comes out about Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein or not, He full well knows, and I'm stealing Claire McCaskill's line, there are more pictures of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein than there are trans athletes in college.
Yes.
Yet he went along with this for the last 8 years. We're going to come out with the list. We're going to come out with the list. People voted for him for that very reason. He put himself in this position, right? This isn't like he's the president, COVID happened, he mishandled it, and people weren't happy. He made a campaign promise on something that's a disaster for him politically and maybe legally.
Yeah. And look, this has always been a case to make, whether it was any number of issues, certainly the ones you just referenced, trans athletes being one absurd one when it comes to the quantitative nature of, like, what are we really talking about here? But the thing about this, Steph, that sticks, I think, is that this is not a political story. This is true crime. This is mainstream. This is box office. This is a very conventional story structure that is so on the nose that it feels scripted. And so in that regard, you don't need to pay any attention to anything about politics at any time in the last 12 years to understand why this is happening and why the cover-up, why the question, again, to quote Watergate, what did you know and when did you know it, right? These are all so basic to me that, yes, this feels different. And I know I've been caught before saying that, but this one does feel distinct.